Welcome in, I'm Artris, and with the new starter decks coming out June 6th, I thought now would be a good time to go over what those starter decks entail and who I thought was the real clear winner out of all 6 of these starter decks, both as far as the contents and the upgrades overall. But before we go over all of that, if you're new to the channel, please make sure to drop a sub, and if you enjoy the video, give it a thumbs up. It helps out the channel so much. Thank you all for the support. Additionally, if you'd like to talk about the One Piece card game outside of the YouTube comments, make sure to join the Discord. The link for that is in the description below. Also, if you're interested in my full comprehensive thoughts about the starter decks, I will be on the X3 Drop podcast later this week talking to my friends Zell and Josh, so make sure to also sub to Zell TCG's channel to stay up to date with that. So starting off, we have 6 starter decks, 1 in each color for each representation. We have red Shanks, we have blue Buggy, we have a yellow Yamato, which is for green-yellow Yamato. We have a purple starter deck, which is for purple-black Luffy, a black Teach starter deck, and then finally we have a green Bonney starter deck. These are all representations of basically what we saw, I think, about a year ago with the other starter decks, for instance, with the blue Doflamingo and like the purple Luffy starter deck. With all of those, they have certain support within them that is new to the game that will kind of change the meta a little bit. Now, what's really interesting about these starter decks is that the English side of the card game is getting these before the Japanese side, or at least the Asian countries. That is super interesting because of the fact that usually I would say that like the English side is late to getting things. We usually have to wait a couple of months before some of these things come out, and by then the meta has been solved on the East side of things. So us having a first take at these is very interesting, to say the least. So with all that in mind, let's go ahead and go over the red Shanks starter deck. Now, with all of these starter decks, you will be receiving 2 new SRs, so you'll have 2 copies of each of those, and about 3 new commons, so I think you should be getting a playset of all of those altogether. The rest of the cards in the deck already exist out into previous sets or metas. We have a Shanks leader in the new art. We have a Howling Gab, which is a card that's already been out in OPO9. Bonk Punch, OPO9 card. Hongo, OPO9. As you can see, all of these are already OPO9 cards that exist. Yasop, which is a staple for some of Shanks decks, especially more of the control variant. We have Lime Juice. Lucky Roo, a very important card for Shanks altogether, whether you're playing the aggro version or the control version. We have Rockstar, which is not really used in many decks. We have Come On, We'll Fight You, which is a searcher, which you could use this or Uta. And then the new cards we have are the 6-cost 4,000 power Uta. It's a 2k counter, and if you have a character with 10,000 power or more, give this card in your hand -4 cost. On top of that, it is a blocker. So this is a very interesting stat line here. A 6 cost is just not good altogether, but the fact that you do get a cost reduction if you have a 10,000 power character or more, which if you're playing Shanks, you likely will. So this is going to be a card that you're going to be playing towards the later stages of the game. You're not going to be playing this early on. Early on, it will be a 2k counter instead. Also interesting to point out is that this is a film card, so you're not going to be able to find it by Uta Searcher or by the Shanks 1-cost event searcher, which we passed over. It could be ran in an Uta deck, of course, but also more importantly here, it is going to be a really nice cheap blocker overall. And the reason why that this card is made is because of the next card we're showing, the 9-cost 10,000 power Shanks. This is also an SR from the starter deck. If your opponent has a character with 8,000 base power or more, give this card in your hand -3 cost, and then on play, if your leader has the Red Hair Pirates type or is Uta, your leader gains 2,000 power until the end of your opponent's next end phase. So very interesting here, being able to buff your leader only if you are a Red Hair Pirate or Uta. And the other thing here that you can use in any deck is that if your opponent has a character with 8,000 power base or more, this card only costs 6. As you can see, this card was in mind when they were creating this card, so they're trying to have a little bit of synergy here where you can pay 6 to bring this thing out and then pay 2 to bring this thing out, and this will be able to buff your leader. So I think that's actually really important here, being able to buff your leader up by 2,000. So having Shanks, for instance, be a 7,000 power leader is very strong because of the fact that his leader ability, being able to negate -1,000 power of an attack, is pretty powerful overall. So that combines really well with that effect. Of course, the interesting thing here is that it says Red Hair Pirates or Uta. So you can run this in red, purple Uta, which might actually be the intended use of this. I don't know if the Shanks starter deck is meant necessarily to really empower Shanks leader overall in a meta. Who knows? But this card seems pretty solid overall, being able to cheat this out for a cheaper cost, especially when you have things like blue, purple Luffy cheating out bodies really quickly and very fast. Not saying that this equalizes the playing field, but this definitely helps add some more power to your repertoire overall. Then we are moving on to the commons. We have Ben Beckman, a 4-cost 5,000 power card with a 1k counter on it. On play, you may trash one card from your hand if your leader has the Red Hair Pirates type. KO up to one of your opponent's characters with 4,000 base power or less. I gotta say, this card is really underwhelming here. I don't really care for this because of the fact that you have to trash a card from your hand in order to get this effect off. If you could just play this out and then get rid of a 4,000 base power or less character, I feel like that's not bad, but because you actually have to pitch a card on top of that, I don't really think this is very playable. I think the idea here is that with blue-purple Luffy coming into the meta, this card can help answer the 3-cost Zoro Juro on curve, so if they play that on 3, you can play this on 4. But yet again, trashing a card is just a huge detriment to what you're doing. Shanks doesn't really have great card draw overall to begin with. And so you are already getting rid of a card out of your hand that you might need for later. Sure, you can pitch a brick because we all know that Shanks runs a bunch of bricks, but that doesn't matter. I think the fact is you're just going down in hand size just sucks. Next up, we have Monkey.D.Luffy, a 1-cost 2,000 power character. Activate main, you may rest one of your Dawn cards and this character. Give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 1,000 power during this turn. I don't necessarily like this card either for Shanks because we have better options for that. I think that the stage is one thing you're going to be wanting to run instead. Sure, this has a 1k counter on it, so it's not a dead card in hand, but it is also something your opponent can interact with, whereas like the stage, Red Force is what I'm referring to, is not interactable. Your opponent has no way of getting rid of that, unless of course they're running like a super special tech card, but that is going to be really unheard of. So this card is just resting itself minus 1,000 power. I think this is more so for the red purple Uta deck overall because of a couple things. It's not searchable, it's not a red hair pirate, it's a film type. You can also run this in other decks outside of just red purple Uta because obviously it's not tied to any leaders. It is a Straw Hat Crew, so you can search that out. It's a supernova, you can also search that out in certain decks, so that's something to keep in mind. This is probably the most playable card out of the box for more decks than the ones we see here. Obviously the 9-cost Shanks could be one, but there is some stipulation to that one overall, so you kind of have to get the full effect if you're running Uta or a red hair pirates. And then finally we have the 1-cost Yasop. This is a 1-cost 1,000 power 1k counter. Activate main once per turn. Give up to one rested Dawn card to your leader or one of your characters. I don't really find the need to run this in Shanks. I don't really know why you would run it, but there are probably some cards like the 5-cost Yasop you can use this with. I don't think this is really playable in other decks either, because the other decks that might be wanting to use an effect like this have cards like Koala for the 1-cost Rev Army. You also have the 1-cost Nami. So those are probably, I mean, just equivalent overall. I suppose this one is a little bit more searchable in the Shanks decks, but I don't really think there's much room in those decks to be running something like this. It could be a great counter or maybe like a mirror breaker if you're going against Shanks mirrors, but to be honest, I think we're going to be entering a blue-purple supremacy pretty soon, so I don't know if we're going to be seeing too many Shanks overall. So yeah, that covers it for all of the red cards from the Shanks starter deck. Overall, I think that this deck feels a little underwhelming overall with the power level and just like the amount of boost that it gives to the Shanks leader. Maybe red purple Uta could be eating good, but I don't think that these red cards overall apply too much to the red card pool to make it worth running most of these cards. The 9-cost Shanks is probably your best card out of all of these. Next up for green, we have Bonney with a new alt art here. That's pretty cool, but we have a lot of cards that are pretty much standard in Bonney decks overall. We have Urouge. Caribou is not one of them. Korobu is definitely not one of them. Barto is a card you can see in some decks, but overall I think this has been replaced by other blockers. The 5-cost Luffy, not a bad option, especially the fact that it can prevent cards from being KO'd, but don't think it's really being run in Bonney. This Zoro is definitely not being run in Bonney. I think you see this more in like Red-Green Law, if anything else. And then this 2-cost Demonic Aura is definitely not being ran in this deck, but you can see this in like Green-Yellow Yamato, potentially other decks as well. And then we have more Pizza. This is definitely a good card to run if you are needing searchers, but I think the 1-cost Bonney searcher is a little bit better. And on to the new stuff here, we have the 2-cost Capone Beige. This is a blocker that says if you have 6 or more rested cards, draw 1 card and trash 1 card from your hand. This is actually a pretty good card overall to play out with the 8-cost Kid. I think that there are a fair amount of blockers you can choose from. Nowadays, I see some people running the 2-cost Killer where you put a Dawn underneath it and you can get a card draw off of it. I think that this is a much better version of a blocker for that intended use. You are obviously still going to be running like Rosinante blocker, but I do think that this is a pretty solid chump blocker regardless. Very cheap, and you're going to be able to get that effect off more than not. Bonney really needs to be able to filter out her hand because of the fact she runs a bunch of bricks, and so this being able to at least filter out one of those bricks and replace it with a potential like 2k or 1k is definitely a great card overall. Next, we have one of the SRs here, a 2-cost Kid and Killer. This is 2 cost, 2000 power. On play, look at 5 cards from the top of your deck, reveal up to 1 supernova type card and add it to your hand, then place the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order, and on your opponent's attack, you may trash this character, set up to 1 of your Dawn cards as active. Now, this is a pretty solid card for Bonney. He already has Bonney Searcher, which is pretty nice, but to be able to add to that consistency with the Kid and Killer can be a nice inclusion. I do think that this card is actually better in a deck like Green, Yellow, Law, because you can replace the, I think it's Caramel or whatever it may be, Tomato. This card can actually replace that instead because this will help add consistency to that deck instead of having just a random 1 draw. This will be able to search the top 5 and find something that you're going to be able to play off of your leader ability. So this is pretty solid. The other thing here, on the opponent's attack, trashing this character, setting up to 1 of your Dawn cards is active. This will allow you, if you're Bonney, to go full tapped out for that turn, and then you can actually trash this and get 1 of your Dawn back so you can use your leader ability. So overall, a pretty good addition. Is it a necessary addition to the deck? I don't think so, but you might be able to add this in for more consistency overall. Then we have a 4-cost, 4000 power, 2k counter, end of your turn, set up to 1 of your Dawn cards is active. Didn't even say the name of this character, Basil Hawkins. This card is probably going to be added to the deck for a little bit more consistency for being able to search out 2ks. I don't think that this is a very playable card. Like, you're not going to let this hit the field at all, if often. So I think that this is probably a card you're going to exclude more often than not unless you're needing to hit some more 2Ks that are supernovas. This could also go into other decks that play around supernovas, whether it's like Red Green Luffy or Green Kid. Keep in mind that these cards can fit in all of those decks as well. Then we have the other SR from this deck, the 10 cost 11,000 power Law and Beppo. On play, rest up to 1 of your opponent's characters and that character will not become active in your opponent's next refresh phase. Then if your opponent has 2 or more rested characters, your leader gains 2,000 power until the end of your opponent's next end phase. So as you can see, there's a theme going on with some of these cards allowing your leader to be buffed up to 7,000 power. So that's pretty important because I think with OP 12, or maybe it's OP 13, I think it's OP 13, we have what has been leaked, a Goldie Roger leader, which will be 7,000 power. So eventually we'll need to be able to swing up to that. In the meantime, this will be able to at least be more of a defensive unit for like when you're going against Blue Purple Luffy and they start spamming out the 9 cost. They won't be able to swing with their leader, at least if you are a 7,000 power base. So that's pretty nice. The thing with Law and Beppo here is that it is a more proactive Doflamingo, like 10 cost Doflamingo. It doesn't hit as many targets, of course. It doesn't stun 3 things, it stuns 1. But I do like the fact that you can choose what to stun. You can rest something and then stun that thing if it's standing upright. So that's pretty cool overall. I don't know that it's necessarily a auto include in Bonney. I think that Bonney's deck list overall is pretty solid and flushed out for the most part. I do think that you might be able to include maybe 2 copies of this at most. The other thing here is that it is a Minx type card. Pretty interesting because you can put this in Carrot, and I think Carrot doesn't have a lot of top end. Carrot's top end is just definitely borrowed from Bonney, so this can be a card that is searchable in that deck and very playable, of course. And then finally, it's a Heart Pirates, so if you are wanting to get a little bit spicy, you can go green-purple and use the 1 cost Law Searcher to search this out and maybe play, I don't know, like Blim, for instance, could be something you could play with this. I don't necessarily recommend that, but just thinking outside of the box here, there are more applications outside of just the Bonney deck for this card. And then finally, to wrap up green, we have the 5 cost 5,000 power X Drake, 2k counter. On play, if your leader has a Supernova's type, rest up to 1 of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less, then set up to 1 of your Dawn cards as active at the end of this turn. Really like this card for Bonney. I think that this is probably the best card out of the 4 or 5 that we've seen so far to add into the Bonney deck. It's a proactive rest 5. If you have a Carrot established on the board, you can rest something with this card and then swing Carrot and then keep that card rested. Also, with the amount of 5 drops that Bonney is getting, you might want to include the 8 cost Rosinante, because then 8 cost Rosinante will be able to cheat some of these cards out. and protect the standing 5 cost as well. So overall, this card is probably the better card, or I guess the best card for Bonney out of the 5 that we've seen, but still nothing super impressive or nothing groundbreaking overall. On to blue with the Buggy starter deck. I think that a lot of these cards are going to be what we've seen already in OPO 9. As you can see, a lot of these are. What's interesting is that this deck includes the 10 cost, which is really nice here. We have, of course, Moji, and then Richie, which is run in some of the decks, but probably not going to be run going forward. Mr. 1 Dawsbones, Mr. 3 Searcher, Cross Guild Search Event, the 7 cost Buggy, which is actually pretty interesting here because this only came out in a, I believe, pre-release event. So those cards you don't need to go like actually go out and buy individually. You can just buy a starter deck, and I believe you should get a playset of them. Hopefully, I mean, who knows? I don't know if this is 2 of or 4 of. Mostly with the like commons, they'll give you 4 of, and then like the SRs, they give you 2 of. But because this is a promo, they might give you 2 of in the deck overall. But this card is going to be a very strong card for you to run, especially if Bello Betty is going to be a menace in the meta that we are going to be playing in. Onto the new cards, we have a 4 cost 5,000 Alvida. If you have 2 or more characters with a base cost of 5 or more, this character gains +1 cost, and on play, if your leader is Buggy, draw 3 cards and trash 2 cards from your hand. So very specifically, this card is made for Buggy. What's important here is that it gets +1 cost if you have 2 or more characters with 5 or more on the field. That is very nice because the 10 cost Buggy needs a whole field of 5 or more characters in order to stick. So Alvida being able to be one of those characters is very important. What's also, I think what's probably even more important than that though, is the draw 3, trash 2. So being able to filter out your hand, dig deeper into the deck, and go up +1 because of that is very nice. And then some people will argue that the +1 cost is for like anti-black, but this is mostly just to be able to get that 10 cost Buggy out on the field and stay on the field. Next up, we have Kabaji, a 4 cost 1000 power blocker. It's if you have 2 or more characters with a base cost of 5 or more, this character gains blocker and +1 cost. And then opponent's turn, this character gains +5000 power. Very awesome stat lines here. It's also a 2K counter on top of that. This card is just cracked altogether. And this also counts as one of the 5. So if you're playing the 10 cost Buggy and you have 4 or 5 cost, it will stick. This will be one of those. And the blocker on top of that is just amazing here. Then we have an 8 cost 7000 power Crocodile and Mihawk. On play, draw 2 cards and trash 1 card from your hand. Great. Then play up to 1 cross guild type character card with a cost of 4 or less from your hand. So any of the ones we've seen so far is pretty nice. But wait, there's more. Once per turn, if your cross guild type character would be removed from your field by your opponent's effect, you may trash 1 card from your hand instead. So it draws you a card, it plays a card, and then it gives your board protection if you are going against a deck like, I don't know, Lucci that is able to answer something. They have to answer it twice in a single turn, which is super annoying for decks that are based around removal. This card is absolutely insane for Buggy. I really do think that this card is going to put Buggy into a tier that is somewhat competitive, if not like a tier 1 deck. Maybe tier 1's a little bit too far. I don't know if we have a tier 0 quite yet. I haven't gotten to do my tier list just yet, but Buggy is going to definitely be, based off of what we've seen so far, a lot better than in previous sets. And then onto the other SR, we have a 4 cost 1000 power Buggy. That is an activate main. You may trash 1 card from your hand and trash this character. If your leader is Buggy, play up to 1 cross guild type character card with a cost of 6 or less from your hand. The best target for this is going to be the 6 cost Mihawk blocker, which is not included in this deck, but you're able to at least cheat this out on 4 Dawn. You're getting it out a whole turn earlier, which can mean a lot in a game of tempo. So this card, while it doesn't look that impressive immediately, I think that this card will be able to be more impressive than you originally thought. This can be brought out with that 8 cost Crocodile and Mihawk, of course, and then this can bring out the 6 cost Mihawk. So yeah, overall, we're seeing a lot of cool synergy here. And this artwork is always really cool. I think it's the same artist that did like the 10 cost Big Mom alt art from way back when. They've also done some other ones as well. So really like the art here. And then to round out the blue Buggy starter deck, we have a Moji 2K counter, 4 cost 1000 power. If you have 2 or more characters with a base cost of 5 or more, this character gains blocker and +1 cost. So very similar to the other one that we saw earlier. And then on KO, if your leader is Buggy and you have 3 or less cards in your hand, draw 1 card. All of these cards that we've seen for Buggy just seem absolutely insane. Like, you look at the Shanks starter deck and then you look at the Buggy starter deck and it's like, what was going on? Like, why has this leader gotten so much support for the starter deck? But honestly, they might have needed it, to be fair. I think that the deck has been struggling to really pick up some steam in a competitive setting. So maybe with these cards, it will be a lot better. I'm not saying it's going to be a tier 0 deck, but I do think that it is worth exploring if you're not wanting to play like a blue-purple or maybe a green-purple. This might be a little bit more of an affordable option for a competitive deck overall. But yeah, I'm really impressed with what I see here. Everything in the deck seems to really synergize with itself, and can't wait to see how Buggy really performs with these. Onto the Black-Purple Luffy starter deck. This is one that I have been personally taking special interest to because I have been wanting to build this deck and make it more of a competitive deck overall, and with support since it has been coming out, it seems like it's on the verge of being really good here. But the starter deck itself, I will have to say, at first glance, is not very impressive, and it is mostly just purple good stuff, or not even good stuff, just purple stuff. And there's not much black in this deck overall, other than a 5-cost Brook that is a vanilla card. So yeah, I guess we really needed that, you know? So let's take a quick look at it. Of course, we have Furnosuke, we have Jinbei, Sangoro, all of these we've seen. And then Usopp, solid vanilla. Nami, 2k counter. This Zoro is definitely a staple in the deck. You're going to need these. This is the card you're going to mulligan for in almost every matchup. We have Gum Gum Lightning, a great removal tool. Gum Gum Giant, which is arguably one of the most broken cards right now, and the fact that you can get this in the starter deck is really nice. Of course, the Brook that I mentioned. And then onto the new stuff. This is a 7-cost, 9,000 power Soba Mask. If you have a Sangoro or Sanji card with a 7,000 power, base power rather, give this card in your hand -5 cost. Very interesting there. On play, return all of your Sangoro and Sanji characters to the owner's hand. So this is actually, for the Black-Purple Luffy deck, a very strong answer to Teach. That is one of the harder matchups for Black-Purple Luffy because a lot of your cards are going to be on play, but because Teach will remove that on play, you don't actually have to remove the Sangoro or Sanji characters when you play this, and you can actually just cheat this out for only 2. So paying 2 for a 9,000 power body, insane. The downside here is there's no counter. You might want to run this at a 1 or 2 of if you're building Black-Purple Luffy. Could be worth running. There's a very interesting play where you play like the 7-cost Rush Sanji on 7, and then on 9, you swing with it. Then you play this card for 2, and then you bring the 7-cost Sanji back out and then swing again with it. So pretty interesting there. Of course, you have to like jump through some hoops to get it done, but might be worth running as a 1 or 2 of. Tony Chopper is a 3-cost 4,000 power blocker. On play, Dawn -2. Rest up to one of your opponent's Dawn cards or characters with a cost of 1 or less. Super awesome support here for being able to battle with Blue-Purple Luffy or any deck that is running Gum Gum Giant. To be able to shut down that Gum Gum Giant with this blocker is incredibly powerful. So I really do like this card in the deck overall, and I'm happy to see some kind of like Dawn resting. I'm happy to see some additional Dawn resting capabilities outside of things like Hody Jones. Of course, though, the flip side of that is that the answer to Gum Gum Giant is in purple, so that's also kind of funny there. And then on to Nico Robin, the first SR here. On play, Dawn -2. Add up to 1 Dawn card from your Dawn deck and set it as active. So this is a backup copy of that Zoro Juro that I was talking about. Or it's not Zoro Juro, it's just Zoro. This is a backup version for that. So if you're familiar with Black-Purple Luffy, if you don't find the 3-cost Zoro, your backup plan would be to find a Black Maria and then use the Black Maria effect at the end of turn to ramp up, but you don't need to now. You could still run Black Maria, but you would probably replace this with a searchable card. Since this Robin is Straw Hat Crew, it's a 2k counter, and you get the same effect as the Zoro. Very nice overall. Love to see it. You can also swing with this later a lot easier than the Black Maria. We have an 8-cost, 10,000 power General Frankie. On play, Dawn -2. Give up to 2 of your opponent's characters -2,000 power during this turn. Kind of an underwhelming effect. No counter on this card, so that kind of sucks, but at least we have a General Frankie card about time. What's not great about this card, though, is that on 8 Dawn, you're probably wanting to play something else. You have a lot of good 6-cost characters that you're going to want to play instead, and General Frankie, although it impacts the board immediately by minusing 2,000 power onto the field, you have to have characters established already to be able to take advantage of that. So General Frankie doesn't have Rush. If it had Rush, this card would be amazing, but it doesn't, so I don't really think that this is worth including in a Black-Purple Luffy deck. And then finally, the other SR in this deck is the 6-cost 7,000 power Luffy, and let me tell you, this thing is, I think, exactly what Black-Purple Luffy needed. On play and when attacking, that's amazing. When attacking there, Dawn -2. If your leader is multicolored and your opponent has 5 or more Dawn cards on their field, your Straw Hat Crew type leader's base power becomes 7,000 until the end of your opponent's next end phase. So this means your leader can now be super tanky for the rest of the game as long as this thing sticks on the field. Your opponent, if you're playing blue-purple Luffy, is not going to be able to remove this if you have a Dawn underneath your leader, because this will be a 7 cost, so they have to red rock it. They can't Big Mom it into life, and if you're poking down your opponent, a blue-purple Luffy leader, with 7,000 power every turn, that gets really annoying really fast. With only 1 Dawn investment, you can just swing for 8, and that's like the magic number against blue-purple Luffy there. So very amazing card here. This card, I think, should be ran maybe like a 3. I don't think 4 is necessarily. You don't need multiple on the field at the same time. You just need to find 1 to really get things going. This is definitely a card that I think that Black-Purple Luffy needed. As you can see, the cards that we've pointed out so far for this specific deck are more so suited for Black-Purple Luffy. I don't think you're going to see a lot of play with any of the other cards in any other decks, but you could run this in like Green-Purple Luffy, but you at that point are running way too many Dawn reductions that you're probably going to be going down to like 3 or 4 Dawn at the end of every turn. And I don't think that's really worth it for getting the bonus base power 7,000. I don't know. I could be wrong there, but I think overall, this is a very great addition for Black-Purple Luffy, and probably not a lot of other leaders overall. On to Black with Marshall.D.Teach. A lot of the cards we see here are going to be what we've seen come out in OP09. A lot of staples: Van Augur, Burgess, Shiryu, Stronger. All of these are being ran. .Q, Vasco Shot. The thing is, this deck already is kind of cheap, so I think that's why they're including a lot of the good staples. We have Lafitte being able to search things out. We have the stage, San Juan Wolf, a vanilla that's not really ran. And then onto the new stuff with a first common, we have Avalo Pizarro, a 1 cost 1,000 power. Activate main once per turn. You may rest one of your full lead cards, so that's your stage. If your leader has a Blackbeard Pirates type, this character gains plus 4,000 power during the turn. On KO, draw 1 card. If you're wanting to play more of an aggressive variant of Blackbeard, this card's pretty solid here, especially with the option of being able to use your stage for something outside of just searching. And on KO, you're getting a card out of it, so your opponent will likely not want to swing into this because of that, but if they don't, then you can just rest your stage and then have a 5,000 power swing every turn because of that. Next, we have Katarina Devon. Activate main, you may trash this character. If your leader has the Blackbeard Pirates type, give up to one of your opponent's characters -1 cost during this turn, and then on KO, draw 1 card. 2k counter. This is a worse Stronger in my opinion, because you're going to be trashing this to get -1 cost. You're not getting a card draw off of it like you do with Stronger. You do have the on KO, draw 1 card, which people are probably not going to be swinging into this anyway or trying to remove it off the field. So that's something to keep in mind there. But you do have ways of getting rid of it with a card we'll get to in a second. Then we have a 6 cost 6,000 power Kuzan. This is a blocker, and on KO, play up to 1 Blackbeard Pirates type character card with a cost of 5 or less from your trash rested. I don't know if this is necessarily needed for this deck. It is a interesting addition that if you want to add in, maybe you could add a copy or 2 of. This will be able to grab things like your Burgess, your Van Augur, your 5 cost Kuzan, which you probably don't want to bring that one out, but you have options is what I'm trying to point out here. So yeah, not overall too bad, but I think that maybe Blackbeard doesn't necessarily need this card. The deck is really tight as is. I think that the deck overall is pretty solid, so you could find some room for this maybe, but I don't know if it's super necessary. On to the other common here, we have the 4 cost 6,000 San Juan Wolf, 1k counter. If your leader has the Blackbeard Pirates type, this character gains blocker and +1 cost for every 4 cards in your trash. So an interesting addition there for the +1 cost. You could be able to dodge things eventually, like Gravity Blade or maybe 3,000 Worlds, but I don't really think that there's going to be any reason to really run this, especially when you have other blockers like Vasco Shot, or like the 6 cost Kuzan is even better than this, or of course the 10 cost Blackbeard. So I think this card is interesting, but I don't think it's necessary for the deck either. And then finally onto the other SR, we have a 7 cost 8,000 power Marshall.D.Teach. Activate main, you may rest this character. KO up to 1 character with a cost of 3 or less. And then on KO, add up to 1 black card from your trash to your hand. What's important here is that this is a searchable Jack. So a lot of decks, not a lot, some decks have been running Jack as a way to answer the board. This is a way to answer the board, but also you can search this out. The other thing here is that the KO up to 1 character with a cost of 3 or less is not necessarily restricted to your opponent's character. So some of these cards, like the Avalo Pizarro, the Katarina Devon, or like a Doc Q that's been sitting there since your first turn, you can KO it and get the card draw off of it because of the activate main. So that's pretty interesting, of course. And then the on KO, add up to 1 black card from your trash to your hand. This can add itself. This can add the 10 cost Kuzan if you are playing other decks that are running that. So this actually has some applications outside of just playing it in the Teach deck. So that's pretty interesting to note. So overall, this is a pretty solid card. I don't know if Teach is going to run it, but if I was playing Teach, would probably run this over Jack. I know that a lot of people are saying, oh, Jack is much better. I think that they have very similar effects, of course, being able to rest and then KO a 3. Jack, of course, is like, what do you value? Do you value being able to have a high-costed character plus also the filter? Or do you like having a searchable, more consistent character to grab and then have the on KO grab something from your trash? It's up to you, but I do think that I favor this over Jack, but that's just my personal opinion. And then finally onto the green-yellow starter deck with Yamato. I really like this artwork that they have made for her. Actually, all the arts that they have for the leaders for this set, for the starter decks, really solid. So kudos to the team for doing that. Of course, this deck has quite an interesting way of playing. Being able to have a double attack leader is very threatening to a lot of 4-life leaders and some 5-life leaders as well. So going over the cards that already kind of exist in this archetype, we have a lot of cards that come out if your opponent has 3 or less life cards. Obviously really strong and able to easily hit with your leader ability, being able to have that double attack. Kikunojo, a great card in this deck for sure. Denjiro, not really seeing too much play. Nekomamushi, solid card overall. Raizo, once again, not really seeing too much play. Blaze Slice, very good way to either like have a defensive turn or go for game. Port Gusty Ace is a really interesting card to put in here. And by interesting, I mean, why is this in here? I guess it's just a 2k counter that can rest a 5 cost. So that's important to note. But yeah, this has no synergy really outside of that than just being able to rest something. So I guess that's what they were going for with this 2k counter. 2k counter Yamato. And then on to the new cards, we have a 3-cost Ashura Doji. This is a 3-cost, 3000 power, 1k counter. On play, if your leader has the Land of Wano type and your opponent has 3 or more life cards, KO up to one of your opponent's characters with a base cost of 5 or less. That is a really amazing trade there, being able to pay 3 to get rid of a 5-cost character, and then later on, be able to use your leader ability to put Tudon underneath the Ashura Doji. Very much great synergy with this leader. Next, we have an Izo 2-cost, 1000 power, 1k counter. Dawn times 2, this character gains blocker. And then on play, your Land of Wano type leader gains banish during this turn. This is a searchable Onami. You can also run Onami on top of that. So you have 8 ways to give banish to your leader, which, yikes, that sounds like a nightmare. But the other thing here, of course, the Dawn times 2, this character gains blocker. So if you're in the later stages of the game, play this down, you can immediately use your leader ability to give this thing blocker. So you give your leader banish, you have a blocker established. This card is really, like, I almost think it's overstated for what this leader does. This is a really good card for this leader overall. So glad to see Yamato getting something really strong here. Next, we have Kinemon, a 4-cost, 5000 power body, 2k counter, trigger if your leader has a Land of Wano type and your opponent has 3 or less life cards, play this card. So another nice card to be able to come out of life. I think that this is going to be included in Yamato going forward because it is a 2k counter that's searchable and it can be a body to come out of life later on in the game. On to the first SR here, we have a 6-cost, 7000 power Kozuki Momonosuke. Your turn, if you have 2 or less life cards, your leader gains plus 1000 power, and then activate main once per turn. You may return 2 total of your currently given Dawn cards to your cost area rested. This character gains rush and 1000 power during this turn. So a nice rush card that can take advantage of the leader ability. And then, of course, your leader can be a little bit more tanky. Or I guess it's not tanky. It's going to be more aggressive because the plus 1000 power is on your turn. And that's like, if this thing sticks, it turns out that way every turn. It's not an on play. It's not a one-time deal. It's afterwards. If you have 2 or less life cards, your leader gains 1000 power. This can also be ran in other decks outside of just Yamato. This is a very interesting card to be in yellow, mono yellow Yamato. Of course, nobody was really running that, but you could also run this in a Nell. Any yellow deck could really use this, I think. So worth at least exploring in other decks outside of Yamato. And then the final SR for this starter deck, a 1-cost, 0 power Yamato. Dawn times 2, your turn, this character gains plus 3000 power, and then on play, look at 5 cards from the top of your deck, reveal up to 1 Land of Wano type card with the cost of 2 or more, and add it to your hand, then place the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order. So this is a nice searcher, but on top of that, you're able to get value out of it later on in the game by really using your leader ability to put that 2 Rested Dawn underneath this. This now becomes a 1-cost, 5000 power body. So a lot of value from the cards we see that are added to the Yamato starter deck. I think Yamato looks really good as well. Now, to go back to the Momonosuke, if you put the 2 Dawn underneath this Yamato, you can swing for 5000 power, and then you're able to give the Momo rush by removing the 2 that you gave to this Yamato, goes back to your cost area, and then you have a rush body. You swung for 5. Your opponent has to respect this. They have to swing into it to get rid of it, or else you're going to be swinging for 5 again. So yeah, really annoying. Really like what they did with Yamato. I think Yamato actually came out as one of the victors of overall structure deck upgrades. So I'm super excited to see how this leader plays, although I will say playing against Yamato is a little bit scary, especially when they start dropping things that give them banish. And now that they have 4 more cards that give them banish with this Izo, and of course the Onami already out there, yeah, it could be a little bit dangerous out there for some people. So yeah, Yamato's looking good. So to summarize, with all of these starter decks, I feel like the clear winners here are the Buggy starter deck and the Yamato starter deck. I think that the overall card value that they bring to those leaders and the existing archetypes really buff those leaders up to make them more competitive. I think that Buggy is the clear winner as far as overall upgrades go. I think that this leader was subpar before, but now has like a fighting edge, or a fighting chance rather, into a meta that is very volatile. Buggy being able to go very wide and then have a bunch of blockers. Very interesting, of course. So very excited to see how that leader performs once the starter deck comes out. Yamato definitely adds more aggression and very annoying little small swings here and there, little chip swings with these smaller characters. Yamato is a very good addition. Of course, Yamato being able to run Hody Jones in a meta where you have Gum Gum Giant and Katakuri blockers. Pretty good. But yeah, I'd say Yamato and Buggy are probably the best decks as far as leader upgrades. Now, when it comes to individual cards, I think the best card to come out of this set is probably the 6-cost Luffy. I think that's going to change a lot for the Black Purple Luffy leader, and it could change some things for maybe other leaders as well, like Nico Robin. Could be Red Purple Luffy gets a little bit stronger. Also could be things like Green Purple Luffy could take advantage of it, or even Blue Purple Luffy. Any of the Straw Hat multicolored cards, leaders rather, are going to be able to use that card. So I feel like that probably, in my opinion, and am I biased a little bit, is probably the best card to come out of all of the starter decks. Of course, the 9-cost Shanks is pretty good as well, but I definitely think that Shanks is, in my opinion, the worst starter deck out of all of them. If you are going into a deck-limited battle where you have to choose a deck and then battle against other people, I would probably venture to say that decks like Teach or Buggy or even Yamato are going to be pretty strong. I would probably lean more towards Buggy overall, but Teach having the consistency pieces with both the Lafitte and the Stage Searchers, and then of course Burgess just getting bigger and bigger over time is very important. Why Buggy is better though is because they do have the 10-cost that bottom decks things, so not a lot of other decks in this set have like boss monsters other than the 9-cost Shanks and the 10-cost Buggy. So I guess like the 10-cost Law and Beppo is one. The fact that I don't remember it remotely up front probably means it's not necessarily super strong, but that's definitely a card that will be great in other decks as well besides just Bonney. So Carrot is definitely eating well here. So with that all being said, what do you think is the best starter deck overall? Which ones are you excited to at least pick up? As I mentioned, Black Purple Luffy is definitely one I'm super excited for, so can't wait for that to come out. Of course, it's a very exciting time because we get to test with these way before anybody else, and it all comes out around the same time as OP11, so we're going to be hitting a new meta hard and fast. Can't wait for that. Stay tuned for more videos on my end. As always, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.